At the firm party, her business partner raised a glass and laughed. "Here's to the clueless husband paying while I take her to the top." I didn't argue. I didn't react. I just set down my champagne glass, smiled politely at the table full of colleagues and clients pretending they hadn't heard what I'd heard, and left quietly. Walked out of the Plaza Hotel ballroom where our firm's annual gala was in full swing, out through the lobby with its chandeliers and marble floors and doormen in crisp uniforms, out onto Fifth Avenue, where the December air was cold enough to make my breath visible and the city lights blurred slightly because my eyes were burning with something I refused to name yet. Some people think silence means weakness, that walking away from confrontation means you've been defeated. They don't understand that silence can be strategic, that sometimes the most powerful move is the one that looks like surrender. They don't understand that when you walk away quietly, it's often because you're already planning your next 10 moves while they're still celebrating what they think is their victory. My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 41 years old, and until that night, I'd spent 15 years building one of the most successful boutique marketing firms in Manhattan. Hayes & Partners specialized in luxury brands, high-end fashion houses, premium hotels, exclusive jewelry companies, the kind of clients who'd pay 6 figures for campaigns that most people would never see because they weren't the target demographic. We were good at what we did. Very good. Our client retention rate was 93%, which in the marketing world was basically unheard of. We had 12 employees, an office in Midtown with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Bryant Park, and a reputation for excellence that had taken me over a decade to build from absolutely nothing. My wife Sophie had been with the firm for 8 years. We'd met at an industry conference when she was 28 and working for one of our competitors, a massive agency where she was just another account manager drowning in corporate bureaucracy and office politics. I'd been impressed by her presentation on millennial luxury consumer behavior, impressed enough to offer her a job on the spot. She'd accepted, and within a year, we were dating. Within 2 years, we were married. Within 5 years, she was a senior associate with her own client portfolio and a salary that made her one of the highest-paid people in the firm after me. We'd always called ourselves a power couple, both successful in the same industry, both ambitious and driven, both understanding the demands of the work because we lived them together. Our friends envied us. Magazine profiles about successful New York couples occasionally featured us, the Hayes power duo, building empire together, and other headlines that made us sound more glamorous than we were. We worked long hours, traveled for clients, attended endless industry events, and somehow made it work. Or at least, I'd thought we were making it work. Ethan Reed had joined the firm 18 months ago as a partner track hire. He was 34, ambitious, aggressive in his approach to business development, and very good at schmoozing wealthy clients at cocktail parties. He had the kind of polished charm that came from growing up with money, old money, the kind that sent you to Exeter and Yale and taught you which fork to use and how to make conversation about summer homes in the Hamptons without sounding like you were bragging, even though you absolutely were. I'd hired him because we needed someone who could bring in new luxury clients, someone who understood that world innately because he came from it. And he'd delivered. In 18 months, he'd brought in 4 major accounts worth over $2 million in annual billings. What I hadn't realized until recently was that he'd also brought Sophie into his orbit. They'd started working together on campaigns for his clients, taking meetings together, traveling to client sites together, staying late at the office together. I'd noticed, of course, but I'd told myself it was just work, that I was being paranoid, that Sophie had never given me a reason not to trust her, and I wasn't going to become the jealous husband who questioned every business relationship she had with a male colleague. Looking back now, I could see all the signs I'd been ignoring. The way she'd started dressing differently. More expensive clothes, designer labels I didn't recognize, jewelry I hadn't bought her. The way she'd started coming home later, always with explanations about client dinners or strategy sessions that ran long. The way she'd become more distant, more critical of me, finding fault with things that had never bothered her before. The way she'd stopped asking about my day, stopped caring about the business problems I was navigating, stopped seeming interested in the life we'd built together. And then there was tonight, the annual gala. The firm threw this party every December as a thank you to clients and employees, a black tie event at a nice venue where we'd eat overpriced food and drink premium champagne and schmooze with the people who paid our salaries. I'd been looking forward to it in a tired sort of way. One more obligation before the holidays, one more night of putting on a suit and making small talk. But at least Sophie would be there, and we'd be together, and maybe we'd remember why we'd started this whole thing in the first place. We'd arrived separately because Sophie had been at a client meeting that ran late. She'd texted me to go ahead, said she'd meet me there. So I'd gone to the Plaza ballroom, checked in, gotten a drink, made the rounds talking to clients and employees, smiled until my face hurt, discussed Q4 results and plans for the new year, and pretended that everything in my life was exactly as perfect as it looked from the outside. Sophie had arrived around 8, and she hadn't been alone. Ethan was with her, his hand on the small of her back as they walked in, both of them laughing about something, both of them looking like they'd already had a few drinks before arriving. They'd made their way to our table, the senior leadership table, where I was sitting with our CFO and our creative director and their respective spouses. Sophie had kissed my cheek quickly, distracted, her perfume different than what she usually wore, something expensive and musky that I didn't recognize. Ethan had shaken my hand with that firm grip that men use when they're trying to establish dominance, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Dinner had been awkward. Sophie and Ethan kept having private conversations, leaning close to whisper to each other, laughing at jokes the rest of the table couldn't hear. Our CFO's wife had given me sympathetic looks that suggested she could see something I was refusing to acknowledge. I'd drunk more wine than usual, trying to dull the edge of discomfort that was growing sharper with each passing minute. And then came the toast. It was after dinner, during that part of the evening when people are loose from alcohol and the formal program is over and everyone's just standing around in groups talking. Ethan had gathered a group at our table, some clients, some employees, Sophie, me, a few others. He'd raised his champagne glass, that practiced smile on his face, and announced he wanted to make a toast. To my brilliant partner Sophie, he'd started, and I'd tensed immediately at the word partner, because that wasn't accurate. She was a senior associate, not a partner, though I'd been planning to offer her partnership next year. Who's been instrumental in landing our biggest accounts this year? And here's to her clueless husband who keeps paying the bills while I take her to the top. The words had hung in the air for a moment. The table had gone quiet. Then, nervous laughter from a few people who weren't sure if they'd heard right or if it was somehow a joke they didn't understand. Ethan's smile had widened. Sophie's face had flushed red, but she'd laughed too, that forced laugh people do when they're trying to diffuse tension. I'd looked around the table, seen our clients, the CEO of a major jewelry company we'd worked with for 5 years, the marketing director of a luxury hotel chain, others whose businesses kept our firm running, all carefully studying their drinks or the ceiling or anything except me. Seen our employees looking uncomfortable, not sure how to react, seen Sophie avoiding my eyes, seen Ethan looking directly at me with something like challenge in his expression, like he was daring me to make a scene. I'd set down my glass carefully. The crystal had made a soft clink against the tablecloth. I'd smiled, not a big smile, just a polite social smile that I'd perfected over years of client meetings and networking events. "Excuse me," I'd said quietly. "I need some air." And I'd left. Walked out of that ballroom without looking back, without making a scene, without giving Ethan the confrontation he'd clearly been provoking. Just left quietly, like it was nothing, like my heart wasn't pounding and my hands weren't shaking and my entire world wasn't tilting on its axis. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. I walked for 20 blocks in my tuxedo, not feeling the cold, not caring about the looks I was getting from tourists and late-night workers heading home. My phone buzzed constantly, texts from Sophie asking where I'd gone, telling me to come back, saying it was just a joke and I was overreacting. I ignored all of them, kept walking until I reached our apartment building on the Upper West Side, took the elevator to our floor, let myself into the apartment we'd shared for 3 years. The place was dark and quiet. I didn't turn on the lights, just went to the home office we'd set up in the spare bedroom, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop, started looking through files, email archives, financial records, client accounts, everything I had access to as the firm's founder and managing partner. I'd been suspicious for weeks now, little things that didn't quite add up, expenses that seemed high, campaign budgets that didn't match final billing, client communications that felt off. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was looking for problems where none existed because I was insecure about Sophie's relationship with Ethan. But tonight had shattered that willful blindness. If Ethan was bold enough to insult me publicly at our firm's party, in front of our clients and employees, what else had he been bold enough to do? I started with the obvious. Client accounts that Ethan managed. He'd brought in 4 major clients over the past 18 months, but one of them was particularly interesting. Prestige Global, a luxury hotel chain that was also a personal friend of mine. Richard Chen and I had gone to business school together 15 years ago. We'd stayed in touch, had invested in each other's ventures early on, had a relationship built on trust and mutual respect. When Ethan had brought him in as a client last year, I'd actually been the one who made the introduction. Richard had wanted to work with our firm because of me, because he trusted my judgment and my work. Ethan had just taken credit for the relationship and run with it. I pulled up the Prestige Global account, started going through invoices and campaign documentation. And that's when I saw it. Discrepancies. Charges for services that hadn't been rendered. Campaign costs that were inflated by 30, sometimes 40%. Strategy consulting fees for meetings that had never happened. Creative development for concepts that were clearly purchased stock templates. Media placement for ads that I couldn't find any evidence had actually run. I cross-referenced everything with our actual campaign files, with media buy confirmations, with creative team timesheets. The numbers didn't match, not even close. Ethan had been systematically overbilling Prestige Global for over a year, padding the invoices with fake charges and phantom expenses. And all of it had Sophie's approval signature on it. She was listed as the senior account manager on the Prestige Global account. Every invoice, every campaign proposal, every budget document, her electronic signature was there, indicating she'd reviewed and approved everything. Either she knew about the fraud and was complicit, or she'd been signing off on things without actually reviewing them, which was almost as bad from a professional ethics standpoint. Either way, her name was all over this. Her reputation was tied to it, and if Richard Chen ever found out, when he found out, he'd be furious at being defrauded by people he'd trusted based on my recommendation. I kept digging. Found more irregularities in other accounts Ethan managed. Not as blatant as the Prestige Global situation, but there, expenses that seemed high, charges that didn't quite make sense, patterns that suggested he was skimming from multiple clients in small ways that might not get noticed individually but added up to significant amounts over time. By 3 a.m, I had everything documented, screenshots, spreadsheets comparing actual costs to billed costs, email chains where Ethan had approved expenses I couldn't verify, invoices with Sophie's signature, a paper trail that was damning and undeniable. Sophie came home around 3:30. I heard her key in the lock, heard her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, heard her sigh when she saw the light on in the office. "Dan?" She appeared in the doorway, still in her evening gown, her makeup smudged, looking tired and defensive. "What are you doing? Why did you leave like that?" Everyone was asking where you went. It was embarrassing. I looked up from my laptop. Embarrassing for who? For both of us. You just walked out in the middle of the party. Ethan was joking, Dan. He'd had too much to drink. You're overreacting. Am I? I turned my laptop screen toward her. Come look at this. She hesitated, then walked over, leaning down to see what I was showing her. I watched her face as she realized what she was looking at. The prestige global invoices with the discrepancies highlighted, her signature at the bottom of each one. What is this? She asked, but her voice had changed, gone careful and quiet. This is fraud, I said flatly. Systematic overbilling of a major client, and your signature is on every document approving it. I didn't know, she started. You didn't know? I kept my voice level, controlled, even though I wanted to yell. You're listed as the senior account manager. You signed off on all of this. Either you knew and you're complicit, or you didn't bother to actually review what you were signing, which makes you negligent at best. Ethan handled the details. I trusted him. You trusted him. I stood up, faced her directly. The same Ethan who just publicly humiliated me at our firm's party. The same Ethan who called me clueless while bragging about taking you to the top. That Ethan. You trusted him. Sophie's face flushed. It wasn't like that. What was it like then? Explain it to me. Explain why my wife and her business partner, who isn't actually a partner by the way, just an associate I gave too much authority to, have been defrauding my friend Richard Chen for over a year. Explain why you've been staying late at the office and taking trips together and showing up at parties together like you're the couple instead of you and me. Explain the toast, Sophie. Explain clueless husband paying while I take her to the top. What does that mean? She opened her mouth, closed it, couldn't seem to find words. I watched her struggle and felt something cold settle in my chest. This was confirmation. Not of an affair necessarily. I didn't know if they'd crossed that line physically, but of betrayal. Of her choosing him over me. Of her letting him insult me publicly and laughing along instead of defending me. Maybe you're right, I said finally. Maybe I am overreacting. Let's see how the week goes. I walked past her, out of the office, into our bedroom where I closed and locked the door. I didn't sleep. Just lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything I'd built and how quickly it could all come apart, and making decisions about what I was going to do Monday morning. Because here's what people don't understand about betrayal. It's not the action itself that destroys you. It's the choice it represents. Sophie had chosen Ethan over me, chosen professional advancement over ethical behavior, chosen to laugh at his joke instead of defending our marriage. Those were choices, not accidents, and choices had consequences. I'd spent 15 years building this firm on reputation and relationships and doing right by our clients. I wasn't going to let Ethan Reed destroy that, and I wasn't going to let Sophie's betrayal destroy me. Sunday, I stayed away from the apartment, went to the office even though it was closed, spent the day documenting everything more thoroughly, created a comprehensive file showing the extent of the overbilling on the Prestige Global account. Calculated that over the past 14 months, Ethan had defrauded Richard's company of approximately $270,000 through inflated charges and phantom expenses. That was felony fraud. That was enough to destroy Ethan's career and potentially land him in prison if Richard decided to press charges. I also calculated how much of that fraud had happened under Sophie's watch as account manager. About 60%. Roughly $160,000 in fraudulent billing that she'd approved with her signature. Even if she hadn't known, even if Ethan had misled her about the legitimacy of the charges, she was still liable, still responsible for not doing due diligence, still culpable in the eyes of the law and our professional ethics standards. Monday morning, I got to the office at 6 a.m., 2 hours before anyone else would arrive. Made coffee. Sat in my corner office with its view of Bryant Park, where early morning joggers were doing laps despite the December cold. opened my phone and called Richard Chen. He answered on the third ring, sounding surprised. Daniel, it's 6 in the morning. This better be important. It is. I need to tell you something about your account with my firm, something you're not going to be happy about. There was a pause. I'm listening. I explained everything. The overbilling, the phantom expenses, the fraudulent charges that had been systematically added to his invoices for over a year. I sent him the documentation while we were on the phone, the spreadsheets, the highlighted invoices, the comparison between what he'd been billed and what we'd actually delivered. Richard was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then his voice came through, tight with controlled anger. $270,000. You're telling me I've been overcharged by $270,000? Yes. I only discovered it this weekend. I wanted you to know immediately. Who's responsible? Who signed off on this? Ethan Reed managed your account. He approved all the fraudulent charges, but Sophie, my wife, was listed as the senior account manager. Her signature is on all the invoices. Another long silence. Your wife? Jesus, Daniel. Did you know about this? No. I found out Saturday night. I've spent the past 36 hours documenting everything. What are you going to do about it? That's up to you, Richard. They defrauded you. You have grounds to press charges. You also have grounds to terminate our contract and demand restitution. Whatever you decide, I'll support it. This happened under my watch, at my firm, and I take full responsibility for not catching it sooner. Richard was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then, fire them, both of them, today. I want Ethan Reed and your wife out of that firm by close of business, and I want every penny of that $270,000 refunded within 30 days, or I'm going to the police and the State Bar Association and every media outlet in New York. Are we clear? Crystal clear. And Daniel, I'm terminating our contract anyway. Not because of you did the right thing bringing this to me, but I can't continue to work with a firm where this kind of thing could happen, where people I trusted based on your recommendation were systematically stealing from me. I'm sorry, but that's my decision. I understand. I'd make the same decision in your position. We talked for a few more minutes about logistics, how the refund would work, how we'd handle the transition of his accounts to a new agency, how we'd keep this quiet if possible to avoid negative publicity for both of us. Then he hung up, and I sat in my office watching the sun come up over Manhattan, knowing that the next few hours were going to destroy multiple careers and possibly my marriage. The firm's managing director, Claire Simmons, arrived at 7:30. I called her into my office immediately and showed her everything, the documentation of fraud, my conversation with Richard Chen, the decision to terminate Ethan and Sophie. Claire looked sick as she reviewed the files. My God, how did we not catch this sooner? Because Ethan was good at hiding it, and because we trusted Sophie to oversee the account properly. But trust isn't a substitute for checks and balances. This is on me as much as anyone. I should have been reviewing these accounts more carefully. What do you want me to do? Call HR. Have them prepare termination paperwork for both Ethan Reed and Sophie Hayes, effective immediately. Coordinate with legal to figure out how we're going to handle the restitution to Prestige Global. I'm assuming it'll come out of the firm's insurance, but we need to move fast. And prepare a statement for the rest of the staff about why this is happening. I want to be transparent that we discovered fraud, we took immediate action, and we're making our clients whole. Claire nodded, looking shaken. And you're sure about Sophie? She's your wife, Daniel. Maybe if we just... I'm sure, I interrupted. She signed off on fraudulent invoices for over a year. Whether she knew or whether she was negligent, the result is the same. She betrayed our client's trust. There's no coming back from that. The rest of the morning moved quickly. HR prepared termination packages, legal reviewed the documentation, and confirmed we had grounds to fire both employees for cause, which meant no severance, no continuation of benefits, just immediate termination. Our insurance company was notified about the potential claim for restitution. Security was briefed to escort both Ethan and Sophie out of the building once they were terminated. Ethan arrived at 8:30, his usual time, looking smugly satisfied like he'd won something over the weekend. I let him get settled in his office, let him get his coffee, and start checking his email. Then at 9 a.m. exactly, I had Claire call him to the conference room. I was waiting there with Claire, and our head of HR and our attorney. Ethan walked in looking confused, then concerned when he saw the assembled group. "What's this about?" he asked, trying to sound confident, but not quite pulling it off. "Sit down," I said. He sat. I slid a folder across the table to him. "That's documentation showing you've been systematically defrauding Prestige Global for the past 14 months. $270,000 in overbilling through false expenses and phantom charges. I called Richard Chen this morning. He's terminating our contract and demanding full restitution. He's also considering pressing criminal charges." Ethan's face went pale. "I don't know what you're—" "Don't." I cut him off. "I have emails, invoices, expense reports, timesheets that don't match billed hours, media buys that never happened, campaign materials that are stock templates you charged custom development fees for. I have everything, Ethan. Every fraudulent charge you made over the past year." He opened the folder with shaking hands, started flipping through pages, his face getting paler with each one. "You're terminated, effective immediately," I continued, "for cause, which means no severance. Your personal belongings will be boxed up and sent to you. Security is waiting outside to escort you from the building. If you contest this termination or make any attempt to disparage this firm publicly, we will provide all this documentation to the district attorney and strongly encourage Richard Chen to file criminal charges. Do you understand?" Ethan looked like he might throw up. "Sophie knew about—" "Sophie's being terminated separately. This isn't about shifting blame. This is about you being fired for fraud. Sign the termination agreement and leave quietly, or face criminal prosecution. Those are your options." He signed with shaking hands. Security escorted him out. I watched from my office window as he left the building carrying a small box with his personal items, his confident swagger completely gone. Sophie arrived at 9:30, late as usual. I let her get settled, let her wonder where Ethan was, let her check her email, and start to realize something was wrong. Then at 10 a.m. I called her to the conference room. She knew immediately when she saw the same group assembled. Her face went through several emotions: fear, anger, resignation. "Let me guess," she said, sitting down without being asked. "Ethan's gone." "Ethan's been terminated for fraud, and so have you." I slid an identical folder across the table. She didn't open it. "These are the Prestige Global invoices you approved over the past year," I said. "Every one contains fraudulent charges, $270,000 total. Richard Chen is furious. He's terminating our contract and demanding full restitution, and you're being fired for either complicity in fraud or gross negligence in managing your accounts. Take your pick which one it is." "I didn't know," Sophie said, but her voice was weak. "You signed every invoice. You're listed as the account manager. You had a professional responsibility to know what you were approving. You failed that responsibility. Whether you failed it because you were helping Ethan commit fraud, or because you were too busy sleeping with him to actually do your job, the result is the same." Her head snapped up. "I wasn't sleeping with him. I don't actually care anymore. What I care about is that you betrayed me professionally and personally. You let him insult me publicly at our firm's party and laughed along instead of defending me. You put your relationship with him above your marriage to me and your ethical obligations to our clients. Those are choices, Sophie, and those choices have consequences." She started crying. "Dan, please. I made mistakes, but I love you. We can fix this." "No, we can't. Sign the termination agreement. Security will escort you out. You have 30 minutes to pack your personal items." "Where will I go? What will I do?" "That's not my problem anymore. You made your choices. Now live with them." She signed, tears running down her face, mascara smudging just like it had been Saturday night when she came home late from the party. Security escorted her to her office, waited while she packed, then walked her out of the building. I watched from my window again as she left, carrying her box of personal items, looking small and defeated. I felt nothing. No satisfaction at the revenge, no sadness at the lost relationship, just a cold kind of emptiness where my feelings for her used to be. The rest of the week was chaos. The staff was shocked by the sudden terminations. I called an all-hands meeting and explained, without going into specific details, that we'd discovered serious ethical violations and had taken immediate action. That this firm was built on trust and integrity, and we would not tolerate anyone who violated those principles, regardless of who they were or who they were married to. Our other clients heard about the Prestige Global situation through the grapevine. Some called concerned. I was honest with all of them. Yes, we'd had fraud in the firm. Yes, we'd discovered it and dealt with it immediately. Yes, we were reviewing all our accounts to ensure nothing similar had happened elsewhere. Most of them appreciated the transparency. A few decided to take their business elsewhere anyway, which I understood and respected. By the end of the week, we'd lost about 40% of our annual billings. The firm was hemorrhaging money and reputation. Claire and I had long conversations about next steps. The reality was that Hayes and Partners, as it currently existed, probably wouldn't survive this. The fraud scandal, the termination of the managing partner's wife, the loss of major clients, it was too much bad publicity, too much instability. "What are you going to do?" Claire asked me Thursday afternoon as we reviewed the damage. "Close down," I said. "Wind down operations over the next quarter. Help place our remaining employees at other firms, return our clients' retainers, end this with some dignity instead of dragging it out." "And then what?" "Then I start over, smaller, boutique consultancy, just me and maybe 2 or 3 trusted people, loyal clients only. Quality over quantity, the way I should have been running things all along." "What about Sophie?" "What about her?" "Are you getting divorced?" "Probably. I haven't decided yet. But either way, she's not part of my future anymore." 2 weeks after the gala, after the dust had started to settle, after the terminations and the chaos and the beginning of the end of Hayes and Partners, Sophie tried to call me. I didn't answer. She sent emails. I didn't respond. She showed up at the apartment we'd shared. I'd already moved out, taken a short-term rental in a different building while I figured out next steps. Her sister texted me. "Sophie's devastated. She made mistakes, but she loves you. Can't you forgive her?" I wrote back, "She made choices, not mistakes, and the consequence of her choices is that our marriage is over. I'm sorry she's devastated, but that's not my responsibility anymore." 3 weeks after the gala, I filed for divorce. Sophie didn't contest it. We had a prenup anyway. I'd insisted on one before we married, back when I still had assets to protect, so the settlement was straightforward. She kept her personal savings and retirement accounts. I kept the firm's assets, which at that point were worth very little anyway since I was actively dismantling the company. We sold the apartment and split the proceeds. She moved back to Chicago where her family was. I stayed in New York and started rebuilding. My new consultancy, Hayes Strategic, officially opened in February. Just me, an assistant, and a freelance creative director I'd worked with for years. We worked out of a small office in Chelsea. Nothing fancy, nothing impressive. But we were profitable from day one because I'd brought my most loyal clients with me, the ones who trusted me despite the Hayes and Partners scandal, the ones who understood that I'd done the right thing even though it cost me everything. Richard Chen was one of those clients. He called me in January to say he'd thought about it and he wanted to work with me again. Not with a firm, but with me personally. "You took a huge hit to do the right thing," he said. "You turned in your own wife. You cost yourself your business. That takes integrity most people don't have. I want to work with someone who has that kind of integrity." We rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. Started with a small project, then a bigger one. Within 6 months, Prestige Global was my biggest client again. Richard became not just a client but a close friend, someone I trusted completely because we'd been through the fire together and both come out with our ethics intact. I ran into Sophie once, about a year after the divorce was finalized. She was in New York for some reason, and we ended up in the same coffee shop in Midtown, that awkward moment where you see someone and can't quite avoid them without being obvious. "Hi," she said, looking nervous. "Hi. You look good. How are things?" "Good. You?" "Okay. I'm working at a smaller firm in Chicago. It's fine. Not what I had here, but it's fine." We stood there in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry for everything. I was stupid and ambitious, and I let Ethan manipulate me. I should have protected us. Our marriage, the firm, everything. I'm sorry." I nodded. "I appreciate that. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" I thought about it honestly. Maybe someday, but that doesn't mean we'll ever be in each other's lives again. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. You can forgive someone for breaking something precious without wanting to give them another chance to break it again. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I really did love you, you know." "I believe you. But you loved your ambition more. You loved what Ethan was promising you more. And when you had to choose between defending me and advancing your career, you chose your career. That's not love, Sophie. That's calculation." She left without responding. I finished my coffee and went back to work. Because that's what I learned from all of this. When pride blinds you, betrayal feels like strategy. When you're so focused on climbing higher, on reaching the top, on impressing the right people, and making the right connections, you start to see the people who actually care about you as obstacles or tools instead of partners. Sophie saw me as the clueless husband paying while she climbed to the top. She saw our marriage as something that supported her ambition rather than something valuable in itself. And when truth arrives, when the consequences of your choices catch up with you, it doesn't feel like karma. It just feels like the logical conclusion of decisions you made along the way. Ethan chose to commit fraud. Sophie chose to enable it or ignore it. I chose to expose it and accept the consequences. We all ended up exactly where our choices led us. I'm 42 now, 1 year after the gala that changed everything. My firm is small but successful. My client relationships are built on trust and transparency. I work reasonable hours. I sleep well at night. I'm dating someone new, taking it slowly, being more careful about who I let into my life and what I accept as normal behavior in a relationship. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled things, if I wish I'd confronted Ethan at the party, made a scene, defended my dignity publicly. If I wish I'd tried to work things out with Sophie instead of immediately ending everything. I don't. Because walking away quietly that night wasn't weakness or cowardice. It was strategy. It was giving myself time to gather information, to document what was really happening, to make decisions based on facts instead of emotions. And the quiet that followed, the silence where Sophie and Ethan expected forgiveness or reconciliation, or at least some kind of fight. That silence was when I dismantled everything they'd built on fraud and betrayal. Some people think silence means you've been defeated. They don't understand that silence is often just the sound of someone sharpening their knives in the dark, getting ready to cut through lies with precision instead of rage. That's what I learned. That's what I did. And I sleep just fine at night knowing that when the toast was raised to the clueless husband paying while someone else took my wife to the top, I was the only person at that table who understood what was really about to happen next.